Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. And this week, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that a lot of people are probably going to go see The Matrix 4. And I'm hoping to release this video to coincide with that, because when I knew that it was coming out, I was concerned, because I was a fan of The Matrix way back. I think anybody who saw the original is bowled over by it, and the stories that they were able to tell, and of course the visual style. And a lot of that can be attributed to what the Wachowskis said was one of their main motivations when they created The Matrix. It was, we wanted to show that computer-generated graphics could go in line with, I'd say, the Japanese anime that we watched growing up, or at least do something to make American movies mimic what we saw. We wanted to turn all of our inspirations into this spectacle, but then also throw in the philosophies, the computer as an enemy, or the computer as a concept, because back in the 90s, there was always that concern about what technology would do for us and what it would do in general, but there's also that machines as evil if we're not careful. So there's a lot of different things that the Matrix did, and even now is such an amazing, huge cornerstone of blockbuster cinema. It changed the careers of everyone involved. There's so much about The Matrix that is so dense and so enriching that there's so much you can dive into. And whether the second or third movies were up to standard or not, that's not what I'm here to discuss. I'm here to discuss what I felt was actually almost as good as The Matrix. It was the Japanese anime tie-in known as the Animatrix. Now, this was a compilation made by the Wachowskis, or at least developed in association with them and their production company, a Village Roadshow, and Warner Brothers. But what they did was they were able to find a lot of the higher-end and well-respected anime producers and production studios, and were able to get them to create several short stories penned by the Wachowskis and by others to kind of flesh out the Matrix story. Because there's only so much that you can do in a 2-hour movie. And as we saw when they were trying to make the second and third movies, there's so much that you haven't really explored and so much that you can't really explore. So what the Animatrix was able to do was come at it from different perspectives, whether you're from inside the Matrix trying to get out of it, whether you see glitches in the Matrix, what the agents are doing, what Neo and Trinity and others are doing outside of it. And, because it's a good balance of stuff that happens in the real world and inside the Matrix, and how they change everything and how you respond to what you're seeing in the movies, because it informs you of the backstories and it informs you of a lot of different things via the spectacle of Japanese animation. Some of it was CG, some of it was hand-drawn. A lot of the styles are vastly different because different production studios were involved with it. And I have my favorites, as I'll discuss. Consider it kind of a spoiler warning, I suppose. I mean, this is like going on 20 years at this point. So really, if you haven't seen Animatrix, my job here, as usual, is to kind of entice you to see it for what it is, but also to discuss what they were going for when they created the Animatrix and what the stories themselves are trying to get across. As a bit of a backstory, what I do want to say up front is one of the things that I enjoy, not just because it's different studios and different formats, it's the fact that you do have cameos from Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss reprising their roles as Neo and Trinity. You have a very good voice cast. And I said before, and I've always said, that the voice cast of Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2 got a bad rap for their portrayals of, Yuna, Tidus, Auron, whatever. turns out the people responsible for a lot of the voices in the Animatrix were, James Arnold Taylor, Matt McKenzie, Heidi Burris, the main cast of Final Fantasy X. So coming into the Animatrix, when I heard those voices, I'm like, oh my god, I'm even more engaged with this now because I know these actors from the game I played so many freaking times, and now you have them in this. So I've always maintained that Final Fantasy X had a good voice cast, and this certainly tells me that they were. I think, of course, the material was different and their acting is different, but it's the same company. It's the same actors doing what they can with different characters in a different setup. But of course, I think for people who are always on the fence, like if the Final Fantasy acting is good or not, you could check this out, or you can check out stuff like Vampire Hunter D, where you hear the same actors in different things, and you get a different perspective on it, I think. So it's a kind of a feeder, because it's two different franchises, right? But it's the same people providing voices in different ways, and some of them multiple cases. But I wanted to throw that out there because I'm the voice acting nerd a little too much sometimes. But hey, I'm willing to defend voice acting to its death. But I'll get over that hill. I wanted to get that out of the way, and then I'm going to talk about each separate section, each separate story, and how it revolves around whether the production style, what it does with the Matrix, how it informed the second and third movies, mostly the second. A lot of these are going to be references to the second movie. But I'll go piece by piece, and then I'll give my thoughts of whether I liked what they were talking about or not, and then maybe rank each one. I don't know if I'm going to rank them all, but there's only 8, so it is what it is. We'll start with the final flight of the Osiris. And this one is definitely memorable because of its animation style. Unlike all of the other ones that are involved in this anime compilation, you have a CG style that is probably from the same production studio that did Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. I've said before that The Spirits Within didn't have a lot to do with Final Fantasy as a tool, but as a visual spectacle when it came out, I mean, it's still an impressive piece of technology. So they ended up using what they learned there to create this short story called The Final Flight. Think of it like a Rogue One kind of thing, where you start off just unassuming, these two people that are probably leaders of their ship just going in a training sim like Neo and Morpheus did. And it's kind of sensual in a way, so be aware of that. There is adult content in this movie, no shit. They get interrupted by Sentinels, the big insect xenomorph looking fucking things that are the real world just bad guys. And their whole goal is to inform Zion that, hey, the Sentinels are there, the Sentinels are coming, they're going to dig their way out, so we need somebody to go in. And the woman heads into the Matrix. So you get a good look of inside the Matrix, how they get, how the visual style, it's really cool how they add in all that slow-mo effect, all the green, like, blur lighting, all of the crazy visual, like, wire foo that you can do inside the Matrix because it's not real. But then you have the real down-to-earth, bluish, dystopic, just dead world that is the real world, and these claustrophobic ships. So you get these like two varied accounts all done in this great CG animation. And it really sets up the second movie because they give the information that the Sentinels are going to attack. And that's how in the second and third movies they're able to mobilize a force to stop the Sentinels and stop the machines from attacking. Really good story. One of the better ones. Not my favorite, but certainly something that a lot of people can like gravitate to, because even back then, and I still think even now that it's 20 years on, the CG is actually really impressive. And they've got good actors like Kevin Michael Richardson, who's doing a lot of the voices, honestly, in this show. a lot of good stuff going on in the final flight. What I think is the best is the second Renaissance, parts 1 and 2. And as much as I like some of the shorter stories, what I really like about the second Renaissance is the narration done by Julia Fletcher. She was Unalesca in Final Fantasy X and, other stuff I'd seen her in. And she's just got this way of, like, narration that really just helps you fill in all of the gaps. But Morpheus in the first movie tells Neo about how the humans blotted out the sun, and they tell you that you're basically a machine's human battery, and they do it in the white room with the TV. And really what this does is it retells that story at length. It's like 20 minutes. And it's a good mix of, like, CG when you get the machines involved, but you get the old school anime look whenever the humans are involved. The biggest thing with the second Renaissance is it's kind of like, whenever I think of the Matrix, or whenever I think of Terminator, or whenever I think of technology 20 years on, I always have this, like, ingrained fear that we're going to turn stuff into a Skynet or turn into the Matrix because humans as a culture are stupid. And this really responds to that. This really gives me something to think about, because the Wachowskis themselves thought humans were stupid, and they came across the humans and machines idea as prejudice, almost like race relations or gender relations. Because humans are stupid, and humans don't learn from mistakes, and humans like to do the primitive, primal survival instinct, and if they are threatened by anything, they will become dorks. They will become slovenly creatures of habit, and by doing so, you ran into this situation where creating machines allowed them to just live their lives and do what they wanted to do, almost like the whole Final Fantasy X, we created Machina so we could sleep and have sex all day, or just goof off or whatever, that sort of thing. We created all this stuff so we could just have an easy life, and then it turns out to bite us in the ass. That was something that they wanted to express, and I've always really enjoyed that. The story is about a machine who destroys his master in very graphic ways and then gets put on trial. Machines are then persecuted and try to fight back against it, but then are driven to their own world, or driven to their own part of the world, and then try to coexist again in a more formal way. But humans keep being stupid, and then the machines just go, you know what? We're going to fight back, and you guys are going to fail. And it turns out they did. They explained how they created the sun of black, or created the sky of black lightning and crap that is basically the real world as the Matrix sees it. There is no more sun because we blotted it out with smoke. And it was an attempt to destroy the machines, and then it ended up backfiring because now we were the power source. They go into such good detail, and the visuals kind of mix in this, like, free-flowing computer-generated visual. Like, it's a lot of colors, like, flying at you. It's like a kaleidoscope. And then you have the general anime aesthetic for the human creatures, and it's just like, there's so much going on in the second Renaissance portion that you fill in a lot of the gaps that the Matrix wasn't able to tell, or at least wasn't able to tell in detail. But they do it in enough time. They don't spend like 30, 40, 50 minutes. They get it done in about 15 to 20 minutes, and it's very gripping, and it's probably my favorite piece because it ties everything together. You really see why the Matrix is the way it is. The next one is a kid's story. This one is memorable because of a little scene in the second movie where Neo and Trinity and Morpheus are getting out of the ship in Zion, and they meet this kid who's like, "You saved me, Neo," and it was like, "No, kid, you saved yourself." It was a reference to this. In this kid's story, they go for like this weird, like wobbly, like think of like human graffiti kind of thing, where it's all offbeat and just 90s looking, these weird etchy sketchy pencil drawing kind of things. It's not clean and pristine. It's meant to be kind of gritty, and when the action scenes are going, you see all these like weird wobbly effects in the character models. It's meant to just give off this like off-putting like sense of just something's not quite right with this kid. He doesn't know what is real. He starts questioning things, much like Neo does in the original movie. And Neo himself is the one who says, you are not alone, and there's some truth to your fiction and whatnot, and you have to find it and believe. He ends up getting accosted by agents, again, reference to the original, and he does his own version of the runaway sequence. He ends up going up towards the top of the school, and, you know, the skateboarding sequence is where it's just, it's a mind fuck. Again, all of those little weird pencil drawings and offbeat shapes and things just kind of coalesce into this just spectacle. I keep saying spectacle because it is. I can't find any other word to describe The Matrix, whether it's the movie or this version of it. When he gets to the top of the building, he convinces himself that the only way to get out of this situation is to jump. So he does. And then he wakes up, and then Neo and Trinity find out that you can actually pull yourself out of the Matrix if you believe hard enough. And that's how the kid was able to survive. And I forget, I haven't seen the second or third movies for a while. I think the kid actually survives to the end of the trilogy himself. He's kind of the viewpoint character for the everyman, because Neo and Morpheus and Trinity and everybody else are hardened, you know, fighters, or they're the one and whatever. This kid's just some dope, and he manages to break free of the Matrix. It's a fun little story. I like it because they bring in that Matrix 2 storyline. Anything that is part of the Matrix 1 or Matrix 2 storylines that they feed into is usually my favorite stuff. Except for this one. It's known as Program. While it does have an effect on, like, it doesn't have an effect on the Matrix, really. It doesn't have an effect on the story. What it really tells is the story of someone going through the training montage. If you recall in the first movie where Neo talks to Tank, and he's just, here's the thing, we're gonna do kung fu, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna do this. Think of it like a very stylized version of that. It's a training program for a different character known as Sis. And the cool thing about Program is the visuals, again, because it goes for a much different type of perspective. We had the CG effect of the final flight. We had the kind of kaleidoscope look of the Second Renaissance, and then we had this weird kind of offbeat watercolor stencil look of the kid story. This goes for a very CG heavy, but very like dark and stiff kind of look. Every character just looks weighty. Everything looks impressive. I had only seen this one other time. It was done in Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, which was released in like 2001, 2002. So I believe the production company for that movie was tasked with doing this, and they were very good at visual shading. Really like impressive facial animations and character proportions. It is an amazing look, because it is obviously CG and obviously like character weighted, but again, it has this heaviness to it. The characters look impressive. They feel impressive. The battle sequences are just really heavy looking. Everything looks like it matters. And then with the Animatrix part tacked on, you have this Japanese aesthetic, because they're in this program, this like feudal Japan look. So everybody is in these like Japanese armor and Japanese, they go nuts with it. So they tie in the Matrix to like all that feudal Japan, like a samurai epic kind of thing. It's like a samurai epic battle, and you just have these two characters duking it out. This one is trying to convince this girl that I want you back in the Matrix. I want to be the Cypher who goes back into the Matrix, doesn't remember a thing. I just want you to come with me. She keeps denying it, denying it, denying it. All the while, they're being chased by each other. They're fighting each other with samurai swords and weapons and shit. You get this crazy look. And the battle sequences are fun. You get to see all this like jumping around and stuff. And then the final duel at the top of those old school Japanese roofs. It's just really amazing. Outside of Second Renaissance, this is probably my favorite, and usually when I talk about it is going to be my favorite just because of that visual style. While the Second Renaissance tends to tell more of the backdrop of the Matrix itself, this one goes into detail of the human condition a lot more, and what it means to be trained as a person in the real world, and just how rough that transition is, and the allure of we just want you to come back. Deny reality. Just deny that you took the red pill. Just go back into the Matrix and just live your life as a battery. You don't know any better. Ignorance of bliss, all that stuff. But done in this battle between friends, I suppose even lovers in a way. That's how like realistic this fight is. It is such an amazing short story. The next one, fairly similar art style, is known as World Record. The narrator from Second Renaissance comes back for a little bit. You get a lot more agents involved here on out. You get the agents showed up in King's story, but now they actually show up as like characters because they themselves are monitoring this professional Olympic level athlete, this sprinter who was disgraced after he'd broken a world record. And the narration says you can overcome the limitations that they placed upon you. You can realize this is the real world through different means, and he finds it through racing faster than anyone in the world. It took the best sprinter on the planet. It's basically telling you Usain Bolt learned that the Matrix wasn't real. That's the story they're telling. But while he's racing, you get these cut-ins of his trainer telling him, hey, your body's going to break down if you keep racing. Or this reporter is trying to tell him, hey, don't let everything bother you. You know, I'm a fan of yours. And his father's telling him, just do what you want to do. If you're going to race, you're going to do it. And it turns out he breaks his, like, all of the muscles, all of the tendons, all of the bones in his leg just completely just pop. And yet, because he is so willed into doing this record legit, he races himself to the finish line and then wakes up from the pod. The agents don't catch him, but the machine in the real world does, and then basically sends him back into the Matrix. He's plugged back in and lobotomized. But he still has one gasp remaining. He knows what he saw. He still remembers, despite what the agent tells us, he still remembers he wants to be free. And it shows you the willpower of humanity in spite of itself sometimes. So along with Kid's story, you get this thing where this guy is almost breaking free of the Matrix, doesn't quite get it. He doesn't quite get to where the kid did. So you get different variations on the same kind of story of someone trying to wake up and realize that they almost made it. Then again, the show also tells you, did you want to make it? Because you saw in the first movie what it's like. You're living with oatmeal sludge for day as opposed to a steak. So yeah, oatmeal sludge, steak dinner. Sometimes ignorance could be bliss. Who knows? That being said, he's left lobotomized. He's left in a wheelchair. He's left in a hospital bed. He achieved what his goal was, and then achieved self-actualization at quite a cost. So that one was also there's a good chunk of these that are really good. It's only like one or two that are just kind of there. This is one of them. Beyond. Beyond is very. I get what they're trying to go for with this story. I don't think it really adds up to anything meaningful, though. The story is this girl in Japan is looking for a cat. She ran away to this like abandoned haunted house. These kids are kind of fucking around, because kids are kids and do stuff. The girl finds her cat, but she also finds some weird glitches in the house. She finds this floating can not even on the ground. It's like hovering a couple feet off the ground. There's like this dog that just turns all black and just runs away. And when she finds the kids and she finds the cat, you find that they're like doing this kind of like bungee jumping thing where they fall to the ground but don't make it. They're hovering in the air and they just keep hovering. So they make a game out of it for an entire afternoon. This girl's palling around with these kids the entire afternoon in this glitched out haunted house. All the while, the agents find it and say, it's a glitch in the Matrix. We need to just let you go. And they get thrown out, and it turns into a parking lot and has no more to do with this glitch. It never happened. Bar Brady, nothing to see here. Go along. That sort of thing. So she finds this doorway, and it could have been in a way to the escape to the real world. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know who developed it. I think it was just meant to be a glitch. I don't think humans themselves created it. It was just a thing. That being said, I don't think the impact of the story was as special. I think the animation style is very anime-centric versus some CG. So they use a lot of like slowdown effects and like hovering. They use practical animation to show you a lot of the hovering skills and all that. It's fine, but when you've gone through stuff like Program and Final Flight and Second Renaissance, it comes off a little bit of a downgrade because it doesn't have much to offer, and it just ends up being one of my least favorites. I mean, can't all be winners, I suppose. The next one is a detective story. This one bounces things back up a little bit because you have a detective in a film noir. He's tracking Trinity because an agent deposited $100,000 or whatever dollars in his bank account, and he finds Trinity via some Alice in Wonderland shenanigans. He finds her on a train in the middle of night. She has that that scene with there's two scenes in the original Matrix. I sorry, I'm trailing off. There's two scenes in the original Matrix where Agent Smith puts the tracker in his stomach with the gun, and then Trinity is in the back of the car with the gun, taking it out of his eyeball. They recreate the eyeball machine with the gun, and they find the agents, and they're getting tracked down, and the detective's trying to save her, and then he's almost infected by the agents, and she just has to let him go. She thought he could be useful as another ally. Turns out he didn't make it, and she had to escape to save her own skin, which in a way is kind of crass, but then you have to remember that he accepted it because he was the one being trapped. He was the one trying to find Trinity unknowingly, and then the agents, coerced him into doing it. So he understood the ramifications of it and died doing so. I liked it. I liked the subtle use of film noir and detective stories, detective novels, that sort of thing, with darker shading, a lot of whites and blacks to simulate a dark nightscape. It was really cool. And it was a nice bounce back from Beyond, which I felt was kind of just there. The last short story is known as Matriculated. And as much as they put a lot of effort into this for the visual side of things, I don't think the story itself really meant a whole lot. This is a lot like Flight of the Osiris, but without the ramifications of it being in the movie. What it does is it tells the story of this crew finding a smaller version of a sentinel, just like a small scorpion-looking thing. They end up fooling it into breaking free of its programming. The way they do this is like this weird, like Tron-esque, like, it's just, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just this weird sensual experience, and literally, it's just all these colors and just naked bodies looking like Tron, and they're being chased in this like just weird. Again, that kaleidoscope effect. I'm having trouble finding words to say because I'm having words and visuals and colors mixed in my brain. I'm trying to come up with words to describe it. What ends up happening is they, much like the Osiris, get attacked by sentinels. The robot who is broken free tries to save the main character, but can't do it in time, and then is just left on his own to see the ship destroyed. So it ends up on a dour note, which I guess is kind of the way Animatrix would be. It is not meant for the faint of heart. It is not meant to be an uplifting tale, I suppose. The one thing I will say is the visual style reminds me a lot of Aeon Flux, the MTV anime, cartoon from like mid-90s, the Beavis and Butthead era kind of thing. I think it was the same company or just one that did that same style for the short story. Again, the visuals are great, but the mechanics of how they decide how to break the machine from its programming is kind of strange. I think they discovered the visuals first, and then they just came up with like the mechanics second. I know that you had to build the story first, then do the visuals. It seems like they came up with the visual ideas first, and then the story second, and they didn't explain it enough. I think they took a long time giving you the visual spectacle, but they didn't tell you anything. They didn't do what Second Renaissance did and fill in all of the narration, and that's where a lot of the impact was coming from. So a lot of good stuff at first and a lot of good stuff in the middle. I think Animatrix kind of fumbles towards the end with a couple of iffy ones. If I was to say which one was my favorite, I would say Second Renaissance by far, because of its implications of the second into the first and second movie. You have Program, which is just so good as far as a battle, but it has that like unique personal edge to it that I don't even think the Second Renaissance does, because that's more about humanity as a whole. Program was about a person responding to the Matrix. You've got stuff like Final Flight of the Osiris, which is really good. Kid Story, Detective Story, and World Record are kind of good. And then, Beyond and Matriculated just kind of feel like they are missed opportunities to really end the Animatrix on a solid note. But as far as a full package, the Animatrix is amazing. It fills in a lot of the gaps that the first and second movies don't get to, and it sets you up for the second and third movies very well. I would really have liked to see even more of it, but I think they did what they could with the time they had, which was, an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours. They gave you a little bit of everything. Different visual styles, different actors, different, like, spots of the Matrix, different timelines, different avenues with which to approach this novel concept of this computer-simulated dystopia. And it really got me back into that early 2000s mode where the Matrix had come out and then this had come out. And then, as the second and third movies weren't great or anything, but they still had this edge to them. The Matrix is still this unique philosophical and action-oriented thriller that just adds so much to our understanding of movies in general, while admittedly being anime inspired. They would not have went through all of the trouble of the Animatrix if they weren't anime fans, and that's something that I really responded to, is because at the time when I was watching this, I was starting to become an anime fan. I had seen a couple of shows, but I wasn't like the diehard that I, started to become, because it takes a couple of years or a couple of, solid shows to like really invest yourself into these things. This was, okay, I'm really coming into this medium. I am hooked, but I really need to see what this offers me before I'm going to dive in head first. Animatrix is a great way for people to dive into anime without like really investing into something they're not sure about, because you have the Matrix backdrop as a selling point. And it's still on Blu-ray. It's still available. I know it's been on stuff like Toonami and Adult Swim before. There is like no reason not to see the Animatrix. Whether you go see the fourth movie or not, I imagine a lot of people are going to. I am going to see it. I am very thrilled to see it. I'm concerned, to be honest, about the fourth movie, because it has been 15 years since we've delved back into this concept. I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but the Animatrix got me back into that late 90s, early 2000s. The Matrix was awesome. I wanted so much more of it. If you have seen if you've seen all three movies and haven't ever watched the Animatrix, I would suggest you do. There is a lot to dig into. There is a lot of good stuff. And you, as a Matrix fan, or even if you weren't a Matrix fan and you're just like, hey, I want to try something different, it is very different. There are a lot of different things at play, and I think people will respond well to it. So consider this a very glowing recommendation of watching the Animatrix. But that'll do it for me. And next week will be Breath of Fire 3. Much like Ys 8 and Castlevania Symphony of the Night, these are going to be reviews of games I have done on my channel already. Breath of Fire 3 is a solid, if not, perfect RPG. I don't think it hits the heights of a Final Fantasy VII or a Final Fantasy VI or whatever. I don't think it's that good, but I think it's like solidly in the... Everything it does, it tends to do very well, but it has some issues with it. So I will talk about that at length. After that, we're going to start digging into RWBY, seasons 1 through 3. I'm already through season 1, and oh my god, I forgot just how different of a show this is. And that's going to be interesting to talk about. After that, I don't have anything yet. I'm trying to set up some guests to see what they would like to do. I have some feelers out there right now. If I can't find anybody, I think what I do have planned is Mega Man X. So we're going to do Breath of Fire 3, RWBY seasons 1 through 3, and then, judging on my schedule starting in January, we're probably going to do Mega Man X1. But that'll do it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, or just comment and say if you like this stuff or not. But anyway, that'll do it for me. Citizen Strife, signing off.